And hopefully you can hear me now. Want to welcome you to our PTA sponsored principals webinar to cover some of the safety questions, concerns, and protocols that we're going to have in place, and also to review some of the feedback on the hybrid schedule and what we're distributing to you guys as parents this evening, in fact, and you probably have already received that. We're going to cover some of those points and then what it's going to look like in the day of the life of a student during hybrid learning or streaming from home. Next week, Monday at the same time, we'll host another webinar. And during that time, we're going to go through some of the intricacies of what instruction will look like for those classes, for our students, and also be responding to a lot of the questions that we did receive from you guys. So first, I want to thank the following people for simply helping tonight. First, Arena Urena, our campus administrative assistant, thank you so much for running this webinar. We appreciate it. Stacy and Debbie, thank you for organizing the questions and for managing some of those and making sure that that I answer the questions that are there for us this evening. Fred Rundle is already here, our assistant superintendent. Thank you for being my wing person this evening and possibly answering questions that are a little bit outside of my realm. And thanks for your support, sir. Fred and also Nick Wold, who is our associate principal, are one of them. Nick is finishing a meeting with all of our athletics coaches. I just left that meeting a few minutes ago. As soon as he's finished, he'll be on here also because he is working with our facilities and our associate principal in charge of that. So hopefully I can answer those questions, but Nick will help me as well. I want to acknowledge, though, the amount of work that has gone into allowing me to present this information. Nick and Fred are two of the representatives of a team, our safety team, our learning forward team, our student leadership team, and our district leadership team that have all worked together to hopefully make this upcoming moment possible for our families. I want to acknowledge the space we're in during this time. There is, I think, a feeling with a lot of our students that feel isolated. I think that many of us sometimes feel isolated in the work that we're doing compared to the community connections that we typically have. I know that there are concerns. There's a range between just simple mindfulness about what we do to keep our community and our students and our teachers safe, all the way to concern, to even scared about how do we do this. I want to acknowledge that that whole range of feelings is out there. And while it's rational, I believe that we're moving forward with an approach that makes the most sense. And is based upon the advice from government agencies and from also from health experts in our community and learning forward as well. There's going to be a wide array. There is a wide array of opinions, whether or not we should be returning to hybrid, staying virtual, or doing more or sooner than we're doing right now. I don't know that we have the space right now to have that full conversation. I also want to share that that conversation has been occurring for months. We're kind of past that moment of decision, and we are planning, as long as the data stays in range from the decision, it used to be the decision tree, but looking at the state data, the government's orders and OSPI's direction of what does allow for a safe return, we're going to be working through those. And if that allows, we'll welcome back our seniors and our freshmen on March 22nd. And our sophomores and our freshmen on April 15th, immediately, or just about immediately following spring break. I think that as our faculty, while there is, again, a wide array of feelings and beliefs on this, we are at the point now where we really are looking at creatively solving the problems and the challenges ahead so that we create these opportunities, and we're truly excited about welcoming those students that are coming back to campus and experiencing them in their full glory as they're here each day. I want to reiterate our district commitments as we move forward with this. And excuse me for reading these, I just want to make sure that I have them right. First, it's protect the health and well-being of students, staff, and families. The second is to provide a quality educational opportunities and instruction for all students, whether in the school building or at home. And to foster and maintain connections with students and families. Through everything we do, we are following and aligning with CDC guidelines, OSPI guidelines, King County Department of Health guidelines, WIA when it involves athletics and competition, and also King County Health. So we're following all of those and aligning those with our practices. We realize that not every organization or advice group says the exact same thing, but those are North Stars that we're using to make sure that we're doing what is wise and in best practice. As we move forward with the hybrids, we'll talk about the hybrid schedule. We'll walk through the day of the life of a student. We'll go through questions that are already present, we know that are there, and we'll answer as many as possible. If there are other questions we do not answer tonight, please do not panic. Please send those to either Debbie or Stacy through PTA. We will circle back and answer as many of those during the week or at next week's Monday webinar as well. So again, thank you for attending. I see that our number is up to 313, 314, 315 and growing. If I say it again, it'll change. So let's move forward. I'm going to share my screen and go through the hybrid schedule that is there. And I want to acknowledge three things that we did receive significant feedback for and why we made the decisions that we made. So give me just a moment. Thank you for your patience. I was trying to make sure that that was hopefully large enough for each person to read. Stacy, can you see the schedule on my screen? Would you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Thank you. So as we walk through this, there's some basic elements I want you to be aware of that we can cover. First is that because of transportation throughout the district, we will be running our school day from 8 o'clock until 2:30 each day. The majority of the learning blocks or periods are going to be comprised of what are really, they're 85 minutes total, but they're really 75 minutes of instruction and student work with guided practice. And so we'll walk through that in a minute, what that'll look like. There are 5-minute passing periods. There are, if you look at the Islander Hour academic support, there's approximately 90 minutes of Islander Hour per week. There's some flexibility with what we do there, and about 70 minutes of academic support. There are office hours on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, with significant office hours available on Wednesday. There are 2 40-minute lunches, and Wednesday is virtual. The rotation of students will be AA on Monday, Tuesday, and the second group of students BB Thursday, Friday. We are waiting for our parents, for you guys to respond and let us know who is going to be here for hybrid so that we can schedule who is in group A and B according to where the least conflicts, so that we make sure that we do not exceed the 15-to-1 student ratio that we're sticking to in the great majority of our classrooms for any that's applicable. Let me walk through a couple of things that I know have had some points of discussion. First, the 85-minute block periods and the concern that students will be virtually online and having to engage for 6 hours a day. Certainly that's a consideration. And then certainly, we all wish we could do this live for every student each day. The reason that we're making that decision is, number one, to consider that instructionally, that time period is really about 75 minutes of planned instruction. And that planned instruction is not all direct teach, where somebody's going to be lecturing, a student's going to be staring at the screen and simply monitoring and writing notes. There's going to be a combination of initial instruction or direct teach, student group activities, guided practice, and assessments. So that really, please do understand that when we think through that, your student, or if you're a student online tonight, you should not be experiencing sitting down and listening and taking notes for 75 minutes per period for several hours a day. That should be really mixed into several different modes. And for students at home, you're going to have 15 minutes between classes to have a little more flexibility with break. And for those students, you notice there's a 5-minute passing period. What's going to happen in that class is you're going to have the last 5 minutes of that scheduled class will be to wrap up, make sure things are safe. If you've used instruments, you can wipe those down, teachers can work with you as well, but give a little bit of time just to make sure you're ready. We're going to transition through the hallways quickly, and we'll walk through what that looks like in a minute, pun not intended. We'll go through that procedure and protocol and show how we're keeping that safe and following guidelines. And then getting to the next class within 5 minutes. We really want to minimize that hangout time and know that we will not have even half of our student body in the building at one time. So we really are anticipating much, much less crowded hallways than would be traditional in our operation of school. The lunch periods, and I'll walk through how that'll look in a little bit too, or 40 minutes, there are 2 of them. And know that during that lunch, that's going to be less than half of our student body. In fact, it's a much smaller percentage as we break that down. And at the end of the day, 2:30 students are released. The teacher directed time is really a time for teachers to take care of business things that they need to do for the day, wrap up, communicate emails, look at a couple of things quickly. And then we've delayed those office hours to make sure that our students on buses can get home if they need to get tutoring and help during that time. So one of the concerns, of course, is the amount of time that we are spending per period. There are a couple of other reasons we did that. The other option would have been we ran through all of our class periods in a day. Some of the complexities of hybrid learning and the setup and the takedown and any of those things that teachers are needing to do with very compressed instructional time would be a challenge. And then secondly, we have greatly decreased the amount of time students are in the hallways and going class to class by doing this in block versus a 1 through 7 day. We also want to make sure that we provide as much time as possible for synchronous learning, which is part of our commitment to our families in our district throughout this year. As we worked with many other schools nationally and locally, one of the things of the schools that have worked with have said that it is highly advised, and if not essential, for us to provide a time for students who may be struggling in this environment, virtually or through hybrid, to catch up and work with their teachers, that there is that time to recover concepts that are difficult. And with some of the complexities and the newness of hybrid learning, providing teachers with ample time to really work together and to refine quality lessons for students. So that Wednesday virtual day is really to make sure that we have that in place and we provide that buffer. The last thing that we've received some comments and questions and sometimes compliments and concerns both is the fact that our Islander hour is quite extensive. I want to recognize that time has been more extensive than it will be in a standard learning environment. For this spring, we believe that having a time for some of our unwritten curriculum, for instance, this week, we have 2 of our grades that are directly engaging with Holocaust survivors virtually and talking about the lessons of bigotry and anti-Semitism and how do you create a good and safe and inclusive community. So there's some valuable pieces we're still going to be doing through Islander Hour, but the other part of that time is going to be spent where there is an Islander Hour advisor teacher that is there to help students with any issues they're having with their schoolwork, connecting with teachers, and they're there as support. And also other teachers can be online for students to email or ask questions and do that as well. So in a sense, there's an academic support or buffer time in addition to that. So we're kind of utilizing that in a more expansive way. And personally, I believe that that's an important part because we have not done this, neither have our students. And we want to make sure that we have a moment to catch up with those needs and to address those on a regular basis. I want to reiterate that there's been a lot of discussion of whether hybrid or virtual is better for students from an academic standpoint. There are varied opinions on that. But really our tipping point is the fact that we are committed to the well-being of our students and that within the CDC guidelines and state guidelines, and from all the work that we have done, we believe, based on that evidence, that this can be done safely. And because it can be done safely, the need to connect our students and to support their mental health as well as their academic progress. I'm going to share a couple of other things. Let me walk through, make sure you've seen the schedule. Monday through. Sorry if I'm a little awkward with my share. But I think you all have this in your email if you want to check it out. The only thing I really haven't covered is, because it has tended to be something that students and parents have found to be beneficial, teachers have times explicitly on Friday to make sure that they posted their week at a glance and what will be happening in the following week. Obviously, because there is a higher demand on executive functioning organization of students when they're doing more virtually than in traditional school. I'm going to change what I'm sharing at this point in time to walk through our staff safety protocols. This is simply a cheat sheet. Stacy, can you see that? Okay. Our students, we have a 60-page document it's over 60 pages, that we use for reference from our district and all the work that we do. And Fred, thank you for coordinating that work. This is simply a cheat sheet that we're using to communicate to staff and to students as well. The premise of this, and we had a few questions about, can we test, or why don't you require testing every day? And really, it comes down to the basic fundamental that the testing can obviously provide false negatives. You can be asymptomatic and still be positive. And the evidence that we're finding is that through distancing, wearing a mask, keeping surfaces clean, washing your hands and using sanitizer, and keeping hands away from faces, those basic things can prevent this from being a point of contagion or point of spread. And so that if somebody, or when somebody, is positive for COVID and comes on campus, we can do everything we can to minimize any risk of that spread happening here. So I'll just walk through a couple of these highlights. I will not read it all to you. Just like we're asking our students, check your temperature at home. Complete the Skyward Wellness Screening every morning before you come in. If you fail that wellness screening, they're supposed to notify their supervisor immediately, and we'll walk through our symptom flow chart to determine whether or not they're able to come into work or what the next steps would be. And we do have a quality leave policy and availability for our teachers if that's there, and we will work with teachers if they are having to quarantine on ways to stream and then staffing those for supervision for students. Masks are to be worn at all times. One of the questions that came forward was, are you requiring the most recommended level of double mask, including a tight fitting mask and also a surgical or procedural mask under that? That isn't the guidance that we're getting from a national and state level. We are requiring that teachers wear masks. We are providing masks to teachers who don't have one with them that day or need one. We also have provided for N95 and face shields for teachers that are in closer contact because of physical demands of some students and special populations and what they need. One of the other questions that came forward with faculty safety, to go a little bit on a tangent, was, are you providing vaccines? Well, we don't have the ability to provide those vaccines, but our district has been working with another district partnering and really trying to make sure that we have a vaccine site that when vaccines are available, we can work with teachers to prioritize them and getting onto that site and reserving vaccines on that site. So we are working on that. We don't control that. We are asking that our teachers, and we'll cover this also, they will spray down with Oxifer between each period in their classrooms. And we will have wipes for styluses for teachers or any microphones or things that they're using so they can keep their space clean. And when they're working, we're asking that they work distanced, if not alone. And the only time they would ever take off their mask is if they're alone in a room and there is nobody else entering that room. One of the things that I know will be a challenge for all of us is to make sure that we are maintaining that social distance while eating. The same rules will apply for faculty as they apply to our students. We'll cover a couple of those things in just a moment as we walk through the day. And then meetings will be virtual whenever possible, and we will maximize distance over convenience, safety over convenience at every opportunity with our faculty and staff. I'll share with you our student protocols. Again, students will start with their wellness screening each day. We do rely on honesty and integrity with the way that people are reporting this. And we are going to be doing everything we can to make sure that if a student is symptomatic and shouldn't come to school, we will support them academically. There will not be a de facto or a real negative consequence to that, that we will do everything we can to support them if they need to be home during that time, to encourage honesty. Any students also that have concerns about people not following the rules or report, a student or a teacher may report that to any administrator or a nurse, and we will follow through on that immediately. We will enforce students being required to wear masks. And if a student is refusing, and that is something that becomes at any level consistent, that student will be required to stay home. So that is something we are going to hold to, be very strict with, and also following distancing protocols. We will be enforcing that. We'll work with students with understanding, but at some point, if it goes to non-compliance, we are absolutely going to be enforcing that. When we work with other districts across the country, one of our elementary schools here, our kids are great right now with actually wearing the mask and staying distance and getting it. When we're working with other schools across the country that have been doing this, what they are sharing consistently is kids get this. They're being way more careful at school than we would anticipate. In fact, most of the other principals nationally are not as concerned with what's happening in the building because they see that there's a collective commitment to that safety. You're going to see a series of messages that are coming to your students and to you regularly about why we do this. The message of why, as a student, I would want to take care of my favorite teacher and wear a mask and keep it safe and be honest on my attestation. And you're going to see the same coming from our teachers about why they're going to do it for our students. So please look for that. We've got some groups of students and faculty members working on that communication. So this is the more formal part. There also will be a more heartfelt part of distributing the why of what we're doing. I'm going to, again, come back to the lunch. And as I just touched my own face, but I am in my office by myself and I do have sanitizer, a reminder to students just to avoid touching their face and to follow these protocols. You should have received these in email this afternoon, along with a request to commit to whether you would like your student or students, and that can be different. You can have a 9th grader and 12th grader with different needs, but to commit to whether they're going to be coming hybrid or streaming and virtually. And we're going to talk through a little bit of what that's going to look like in just a moment. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to take off screen share, just kind of walk through the day. Before I go through the day, Stacy, Debbie, or Fred, we'll cover the transition times and class procedures, ventilation, cleaning of rooms, lunch procedures. Is there just something in general that any of you would like to add to this conversation or something that I may have missed? Fred?
I just want to address the vaccine point that you were making a few minutes ago, Walter. And, we've been working along, with multiple entities thinking about the vaccine piece and what that might look like as a school district. As you said, there are 2 different school districts that we've found a partnership with and who we continue to reach out to. Our greatest barrier right now is simply access to the vaccine. The one district, and again, it's our need to partner with the district is really due to our size, that a lot of the organizations such as Safeway and Albertsons and others, they want to be thinking of maximizing their resources. And so that's why we've partnered with 2 of the larger school districts. But the one in particular, our nurses have been ready to go for the past 4 going on 5 weeks to go and get trained and participate in the vaccine clinic itself to help support the process. And there just simply hasn't been the vaccine. And so it's not because we're not trying as a school district, we're certainly working on that. And the other one that's come up is testing. And would we be testing our students? I was just talking to Carla Rimmer, who is one of our COVID lead nurse for the school district today. There are some possibilities around some testing that we will be looking at. It's less about screening and more about targeting testing to students who may be experiencing symptoms, which might be able to speed up the process for students to determine whether or not, and staff, to determine whether or not they're COVID positive. which if they are, we can address that. And if they're negative, we can get them back to school faster than maybe going through the King County. So we're working on both angles right now, actively trying to be the best, be responsible and responsive to our community.
Fred, thank you so much. Debbie, Stacy?
Yes, since I'll follow what Fred was saying. There's a couple questions from parents that have come in that I think follow those statements really well. So thank you. So there, one of the questions is about the health room. So will there be a quarantine room if kids are questionable? Is there a separate quarantine space? Can you maybe talk about the health room?
Sure. We have two that are scheduled at this point in time. They are separate and apart from our nurse's office formally. So well kids who are needing medical attention or medication or whatnot still have the nurse's office available. And separately from that, we have scheduled and monitored rooms for anybody who may exhibit symptoms or we have a concern about at that point in time. Brad, anything you'd like to add to that? Okay.
No, we're fortunate as a school district, in large part because of the support through our levies and other funding mechanisms from our community to be able to support all 6 of our schools with a nurse. And that's not typical in and around the region as part of the prototypical school model and the way we're funded from the state. We would not even have probably 2 full-time nurses for the district. We've chosen over the years to make that a priority, not just for this, but for other reasons as well. But because of that, I think our school district is in a really good place in terms of our ability to contact trace when we've had situations where we've had either staff or students test positive for COVID-19. And to date, we haven't had one case traced back to our schools in any of the students who have been coming. They've all come from the outside, but our nurses have been able to confirm that quickly. They all have their own isolation rooms in the schools as well as their offices.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then maybe, I guess I'll just keep going so we don't keep having to come back with it. But some of the other questions from parents were, what is the protocol for if someone has a confirmed COVID exposure or an unconfirmed COVID exposure?
So, so if we have a case here on campus, if we have a student that has been here on campus, our nurses engage in a contact tracing protocol, and we'd be reaching out to any families with whom or students to whom there had been close contact with a confirmed case. I'm not sure about an unconfirmed case, what that means. Help me out with that, please, Debbie.
That's a good question. I think
that might be. Yeah, maybe that's a close contact or a suspect. Maybe they had a close contact maybe on that,
COVID,
Debbie.
but not, yes.
Got it. So not a, yeah, so a close contact. So if there had been close contact, our nurse would work that family and provide them advice based on that contact and based on that student situation. There's a flow chart that they're using to go through how they would communicate. And then they would let us know as an administration, and we would support that student if they needed to be quarantined at that time, or if they were returning, we would make sure that they were in a good spot.
Yeah. And we do work all of those 7 days a week. Our administrators, our nurses, and district office staff are frequently working on these over the weekend. And I illustrate that not because I'm trying to demonstrate anything more than we're fully committed to the health and safety of our students and our staff 7 days a week while we're going through this. The last thing we'd want is not to be responsive on a Saturday and put people in jeopardy on a Monday. And that's testament to the faculty and the staff we have in our district.
Agreed. I've been greatly impressed with that. As soon as that alert has come, we've been following through on that contact tracing. And yes, frequently that's over the weekend that we're doing that work. So Brad, I appreciate the work of our nurses and our administrators on that front. Stacy or Debbie, any other questions for now? All right. Stacy, were you about to say something? I'm sorry.
There is one other question, and it's in regards to, you mentioned the PPE for the staff. Mm-hmm. So one question that kind of came up repeatedly was, what happens if kids show up to school without PPE? Will masks?
We will provide them with masks if they show up without PPE. We're asking just so that we can conserve our resources that students do bring their own mask. That's a BYOM sort of thing, but we will provide masks for any student who needs one, whether I mean, they dropped it during the day or they didn't bring it or whatnot. Yes, and we have provided for that thanks to Fred and his group. So yeah, we're ready to go on that front.
Great, thank you.
You may go ahead and start walking through what happens in the building before students show up, and then we can walk through what the day looks like and lunch, and then come back to some of the other questions. Is that okay, Debbie and Stacy? By the way, thanks guys for tag teaming on this with me. I appreciate it. First, working with Tony Kuhn and our maintenance and operations department, they are running, have been, and will continue to run our the flow of our air conditioning or HVAC system. Sorry, it's air conditioning most of the time in Texas, other than this past week. Here, it's more HVAC. They're running that as continually as possible. In fact, it's running pretty much all the time. They start that 2 hours before the school day begins to make sure that that airflow has begun and fully operational, and that it's been going on for a while. There's a good turnover, and they keep it going 2 hours after the building is not occupied. The second part is they have maximized the input of outdoor air and minimized any recirculation that's occurring within the building. I mean, I can't say it's to zero in promise, but it's approaching zero. They are really pulling in outside air almost exclusively, and they're putting the highest level of filtration that they can use within the system, which is typically that preferred MERV 13 level, which is an upgrade. We usually use 8 to 11, and we're upgrading to a higher quality, or we have upgraded to a higher quality filter. So that air is being circulated continually. It is with filtration, and we are allowing teachers and students, if they can open the windows and they want to, they certainly can. We are going to leave our doors closed because that pressure differential actually creates better airflow within the building and maximizes that input of outside air. So that's one thing that's happening before your students ever show up. Second thing, Fred, go for it.
Just quickly, sorry,
Yeah.
Principal Kelly. A number of families had asked some great questions when the elementaries were getting going around, well, won't it be extremely cold in the building and make it so uncomfortable for learning? And the air still goes through the heat exchange through the coils, but because we're not recycling air, we just can't get the buildings as warm, but the air is still getting warmed by our units. It's just not as warm. And when there's more people in the building, natural body heat will help heat the building. But having been in all the elementary schools so far, it has not been a point of major concern for anyone that we've been extremely cold. So that's come up. So I just thought I would address it.
For a personal point of reference, I can vouch that in our building, pretty much every day, it's typically long sleeve shirt or sweater, but not requiring a coat at any point in time. So just as a personal point of reference. The other thing that happens every night is every room is deep cleaned and sanitized. Then our restrooms and doors are actually going to be cleaned regularly through the day. So the door handles, anything has contact, our restrooms, those are going to be cleaned multiple times through the day, but of course deep cleaned every night. And then hand sanitizer and mask will be ready and ready to go. Hand sanitizer is through multiple stations throughout the hallways for students. It's in our classrooms. So those things are going to be stocked and ready to go on a daily basis. As students start the day, we ask that they do complete honestly their wellness screening and let us know if there are any symptoms or concerns. We will advise them based on what they share with us, whether they should stay home or not, and we'll support them if they are staying home out of concern for the wellness of all. For those that are driving to school, we do ask that students don't carpool outside of their own home group. But the few positives about hybrid learning within COVID is that because we'll have only a max of half of our students, we should be able to accommodate parking for all students at any point in time. So when they come on campus, it's their turn, we should have a parking spot. We're working on allocating that based on the return, the commitments of who's coming back. For those that are riding the buses, students are going to be required to mask. And while we're asking they complete their attestation beforehand, we're also going to check that at the beginning of each class. To come back to it, for the buses, we will distance students as much as possible. The state guidance does allow for 2 students to a seat. We're going to hopefully spread students out as much as possible. So it's hopefully as many times as one to a seat. But what we're finding, and the guidance we're provided, is if it's less than 15 minutes with masks, that all of that is within safe confines and doesn't constitute close contact. Fred, I'm seeing you nodding. I want to make sure that I'm correct on that as you're living this too. So students come on campus. We're allowing students to enter through any door. We'll be monitoring those doors and those entrances because we want to spread students out as much as possible and provide for the most efficient and direct transfer from the outside of the building to the class they're attending for the first thing for the day. As students arrive on campus, the teachers will have on their Skyward account when they check attendance, their wellness checks. Per our agreement with MIEA, any student who has not positively set a wellness screen or attestation and submitted that, they will be sent to the office, and our administration, office staff, and or nurses will be dealing with those students and making sure that we either have a positive attestation, they can go back to class, or if not, we do contact the parents and we work from there. So we're asking that that happens. We're also enforcing that at the point in time. Our classes, the way that they're set, it'll be a maximum for any standard class of 15 students. That also does include our music classes as well in any classroom. We have spaced that out where you can think of a 6-foot diameter. I'm saying, sorry, a 6-foot radius. But a 6-foot radius around that student. I was having to think about my geometry, had to go back a moment. A 6-foot radius around that student for each student in that room. And yes, teachers are working to try to design lessons where there's the least movement or times where students have to move out of their personal space as possible. And those desks will be seated where they are face forward. So it's face to the back of the next person. It's not face to face in the arrangement. I know that's a bit rigid, but we feel that that's the safest way to move forward with this at this time. So during class, there's going to be that 75 minutes that we really believe and hope will be a mixture of different instructional methods. So a student's not just locked in for that whole time on the screen, that they have a chance to work and think and communicate with others. At transition time, we're giving time at the end of each class for students to get ready, so that's efficient. And then a 5-minute passing period. And it's 5 minutes is plenty of time. It is less than half the students in the building during any one of these days, but we want to minimize time where students are hanging out, socializing. We want them to be through the halls, stay distance as much as possible, and then get to the next room where that 6-foot radius is present and that we're monitoring that very directly. So we will be working with that. And there's also that little buffer time if a student, based on all these distancing concerns and restroom usage, needs to take care of their business. They can work with that teacher during that time to make sure they have time to be prepared for learning. Transitioning, again, the guidance is that students stay 6 feet apart whenever possible, I believe is the specific wording. And we're upholding that. Students will be monitored through their hallway transitions. And if they get to the next class before the other class has been dismissed, they'll wait 6 feet down a line, down the hallway while they're waiting for that next class to leave. Throughout the building, there's 6-foot distance reminder markers on the floor. So think about it almost like Pac-Man as you look through the hallways and also through the restrooms. So if students need to use the restroom during that passing period, there are distancing requirements. There are spots that remind them of that space, and we'll be monitoring the exterior of those restrooms to make sure that students are respecting that protocol as well. We do allow for students to have water with them. They may take a quick mask break. So in other words, if they need to take a sip of water during the day, they can take their mask, take it off, take a quick sip, 2 to 3 seconds, and put it back on. And they may do that through the day. When we get to lunch, we have a few things working in our favor on this. Number one, it's an open campus for 10th through 12th grade. And while that may seem a bit problematic, really, we're encouraging students to go to their own homes and eat if possible. We're going to be monitoring the parking lot if they want to eat in their car by themselves or with other family members in the same household. And we are going to be providing outdoor spaces as long as they're distanced for students to have their lunch. For students, they'll be eating indoors, and when they're here, we'll be using the upper commons and lower commons. It's approximately, it's basically one chair per table in those spaces. We will also be working at one chair spaced at well past 6 feet apart. We're typically looking at 12 feet during that time. Lunches will be grab and go for any student who's purchasing their lunch here. And there'll be satellite stations in the gyms where students will be seated and in the upper and lower commons. So we will have that as spread out as possible. And we are hoping that students maximize their opportunity for an open campus lunch so that we can have that distance even greater for our students. We're asking that students, let me reframe that, we're requiring that students actually wear their mask when they're not directly eating or drinking a beverage at that point in time. So we do ask they do continue that. We are looking at ways to make lunch more enjoyable through radio broadcasts, through online quizzes and games, and possibly even some small group outdoor performances by a couple of our band groups during that time. So we want to make sure that it's enjoyable. And while students can't get close to one another, we do want to make sure that that's a time that is at least enjoyable and pleasant. We go through the day into transition. Students go home at 2:30. We will be monitoring that egress and making sure that students are not hanging out and that they are staying distanced during that time. I think that covers a lot of that ground. I hope that was an okay way to go through that. And Debbie and Stacy, I know that there's several other questions. I know that we just talked about the test, the COVID test question, and a focus on containing spread versus testing. Okay, so please fire away.
Okay, here I can start. So these are more just clarifying because you did cover these, but just to clarify, so will Metro be available for kids to get to and from school?
No.
Okay, thank you. I just want to put it on the record as a clear, because I know that's a big question that's come up. And then the other one is, I know you addressed parking for students and that there will be plenty with half capacity. Is there a process parents need to go through to reserve a spot, or is it open parking on campus?
We will have reserved spots. We will have a process, and we will have that available in the next couple of weeks. If I could just, I know Nick may be tied up with another meeting at this point in time. That we were just talking about that this morning. So we will have that available to parents. What we're waiting on, Debbie, is just to we're going to find out who registers to come in for hybrid. Then we're going to offer that process to the people who are registering for hybrid. Okay.
So another question that has come up, and I don't know that it necessarily falls under what you were just speaking of, but it's regarding privet. And is there a protocol for these students? Because they get picked up and then sometimes brought back to campus after their classes there.
Right. So they will be completing their attestation like all of their students at the beginning of the day. Anytime that a student is coming onto campus, and anytime they enter a class, their teacher is going to see whether they completed an attestation or not. And then they'll be expected to go through the same rules of distancing, masking, and social distancing is just as any other student at that point in time.
Another one regarding the classroom makeup. How will band and other similar classes be managed? I know those are big groups, and so where is that right now?
We've had about 2 or 3 meetings a week because there are a couple of factors. Here's what I'm going to share our parameters we're working with. Number one, the district will provide the recommended PPE for the use of basically whether it's somebody singing or playing an instrument, because each one of those instruments has a different type of PPE provided. Number two, the ratio of students in any one class for a musical group will be 15-1, just to make sure, regardless of the room space, that's the maximum we're working with, and no more than 30 minutes of playing at a single space before the air recirculates and another group comes in. So those are the things we're working with. We're working, number one, with David Bentley and Parker and Annalise and everybody else in our music staff. We're working with them to see how can we do that instructionally? What is the specific PPE, because we're ordering it now. And then on top of that, what does the staffing look like on a district level to make sure that we're covering those needs? We're working through those things now. And then outside performances and performances at games are things that we're following. We'll have more information next week. That's moving very quickly right now.
Thank you.
So another question that actually just came in is regarding lunches. They're just wondering if a ninth grader can be picked up from school by a parent and then brought home to eat lunch and then brought back.
As with any, this is one of the nice parts is this isn't any different than pre-COVID. You may check your child out of school and bring them back to school. That is, you can do that as a parent here. And so if that's what you believe is safest and best for your student, your child, you are welcome to do that. Again, we're working with attestations and distancing. So if you're taking your student home, we do ask in good faith that you are safe. It's best at home and certainly at any place distance. But yes, you may do that as a parent. Thank you for asking that.
Mhm.
You cannot do that as an older sibling, but you can do it as a parent.
Great. There has been some interest and some questions about how the teachers are doing with this process. Are they all returning? What accommodations are being made? What is their response right now to returning?
Yeah. First, acknowledge that I know this doesn't surprise the adults. Sometimes it surprises the kid. Our teachers are human beings, and and there's a wide array of feelings about what is the right thing to do. But there are a few real positive movement pieces that we have going forward. Number one, we do have right now, I believe it's 6, but a small number of teachers who are taking leave for Family Medical Leave Act. Some of those are related to COVID and their personal health concerns. Some of those have nothing to do with COVID and would be happening anyway at this point in time. We have at this point hired teachers to work in the short term in lieu of those teachers during that leave, and that leave varies teacher by teacher. But at this point today, we are staffed completely for that time. We have a very, very small number of teachers that have specific reasons we're allowing them to work virtually. And by small number, I mean, right now we're talking about 2, I believe. But to be very transparent, we do work with teachers as much as we can to allow that virtual piece. But that being said, part of their contract right now is when students are on campus, their job requirements are that they are here in person. And so we work with them, our HR department, to provide leave for those who really should not be taking any of those risks because of their medical health. And then beyond that, working with them and providing as much support as we can. We have teachers that we're providing plexiglass barriers for very specific concerns or needs. Our office staff has that as well. And we are allowing for teachers to wear face shields or masks. And when it's required as part of their job, we are providing that PPE for them. Fred, did you have a comment? I see you went off mute there.
Yeah, I really just kind of reiterate a couple things that you mentioned there. I think first and foremost, I think it's well said that all of our staff, you as a principal, custodians, bus drivers, nurses, teachers, paraprofessionals, we're all human beings too. And this has been challenging at a personal and professional level for everyone. And so it has been trying to balance that side of us that is really the humanistic and thinking about us as people and our staff as people and what they need. And then also realizing that we have a professional responsibility to be at our very best for the students and trying to balance that. And, we've gone through a number of emotional roller coasters all the way through, from our very first staff members who were returning in September to work with our students who needed the services and supports most through whether or not it was special education or other services, to our kindergartners coming back, and then our first graders, and then our second and third graders. And now we have our fourth and fifth graders who will be joining us again in person on Monday, a week from today. And with each new group of students who return, it's another group of staff members, and there's lots of anxiety around that. I can remember when I was first coming back August 1st, really back in full time. It was strange. It was odd. It wasn't your normal school day. But walking around West Mercer today and in and out of classrooms and having my mask on and washing my hands going in and out, it's become my routine. But I have to also remember that it's not everyone's routine. And we have to make sure that we're being sensitive to that. So I really appreciate that question. And it's not easy because we have the interests of the students, the staff, the community, our profession, ourselves, and it's really trying to balance it out. But I am proud of our district to be in a position where when I complete the first report for OSPI, which is due March 1st, and they list out what are your dates for reopening, we have dates, and we're pushing our system, and we know that. And I'm proud to be in this district where we have educators who are coming back. We have parents who want their kids back. We have kids who want to be back. That's a great position and a great place to be in.
I'd like to as an adjunct to that comment, Fred, there are a couple of other points. We really did about a couple of few weeks ago, I believe, on this campus, hit kind of an emotional tipping point of going through, should we do it? What's the best thing to do to really okay, how do we make this work? And a genuine excitement for seeing each other as professionals and also students. So I really have felt that the coordination of getting an agreement with our education association, also with some of the parallel planning that was going on to make this work on a high school level, and we're still working on it, but we're pretty far down the path at this point in time, that those two things started to really generate a lot of thinking of, okay, how do we make this special for students during this time? How do we orient kids back to campus? How do we provide for a great experience for them under these conditions and with them? There has been an increased excitement in the past 2 weeks that we haven't sensed for several. And I think it's because there's some resolution around the agreement and our plans at this point in time. So, and one of the things that I was so proud of one of our students who asked made a very tough public position with our board of trustees in public comment last week. It was the same student that talked to us through our student leadership class and concerned specifically for one of his teachers. And what were we doing to make sure that we took care of our teachers? And that kind of care from a student body to a faculty, you can't buy that. And we want to make sure that we honor that in every way that we can and acknowledge that this is tough. It's heavy lifting.
And and that concern, Principal Kelly, is, it's from our staff and our from a teaching and learning standpoint. It's not just about health and safety. It's also about what's going to be the very best for students. And that's a really admirable position to be in too, to have staff who are focused on not just their health and safety and the students' health and safety, but once we're back, how do I deliver the best socially, emotionally, and academically for students? And that's why we've been grappling with our models and what's the best model. We're asking our educators to do something extraordinary, which is basically pivot to the 4th different learning model in 1 year. And I admire that tenacity. I stand next to them to support them. And, again, we're going to continue failing forward, but we're going to fail forward quickly. And the way we're operating probably in March will be different than April and May, because we're going to learn along the way. But the risk that our staff are willing to take instructionally, it's really
instructional
something
risk
that I stand in admiration and support of, and we'll be working right alongside them.
Well said, sir. Thank you. All right, next question. And Nick Wold, welcome to the panel. I know we were sharing that you had dual meetings and leading another meeting coming into here. So I appreciate you joining us. We've gone through several of the questions. There may be a brief athletic one here in just a moment. I think you already have the most current information when we get to that. So thank you, sir.
Walter. Yep, thank you.
All right, Stacy, Debbie, whoever goes next, what you got?
So one question, 1 second. So there's a concern, or there just seems to be a lot of time that's being dedicated for student support from teachers. So if a student is doing okay academically and doesn't need that much teacher support, how will that time, how should they use that time, I guess? Is that just kind of extra study time for them?
My recommendation for, a student who is, say, in the middle, they're doing okay. They're not killing it. It's not easy. They're not gunning for a 99, but they're not really, not falling off the table. They kind of get it, right? If I were a student in that role, I would use some of my homework time to determine which things am I having the most challenge with, so that I can have questions for teachers during that time. So it's not that it wouldn't be for all, it is for all students. And I would encourage a student who's making an 82 or an 87 or a 70, whatever is okay, to look at what would be those questions that I'm still struggling with, have those ready for teachers during that time. It's not just for struggling students, it's there for all students. That being said, there will be students that teachers will be reaching out to because maybe it was just something that was tough for them that day, or maybe it's a student that's consistently struggling in that subject. They will be inviting them and reaching out to students during those times, but students are also, they can reach out to teachers as well. You're the first person, Stacy, that question represents the first person was like, well, what do I do if I have too much time? Because I haven't heard that one a lot lately. But I agree, we want to use that time well during our day. Okay.
Are we ready for, so this is a quick one. And I think it was sort of covered before, but it's a little bit of a different scenario. What happens if and I know that this has been answered in the past in other meetings, but what would happen if there's another COVID-19 outbreak in our county after our students come back to campus?
I'll start, Fred. This is my personal test to make sure I've got this right as well. First, if the data is guiding us by the state dashboard, and our county health data is guiding us to go back to virtual instruction, we are subject to that. We're certainly hopeful we won't be in that position, but we can't promise that won't happen. If that did happen, we would likely go directly back to our virtual instructional plan that we're doing right now. Fred, anything you want to add to that, or anything I'm wrong on?
No, I think it's, I think I saw today where the cases per 100,000 are down under 140, 130. And so what I hope is that we can stay down low. Now, if we're back in and the cases get to 200, does that mean we automatically close school down? No, it doesn't mean that we automatically do that, because there are so many different factors in there. What we'll be paying most attention to is, as we bring back more and more students, are we able to control spread of COVID-19? And so far we have. Are we able to adequately contact trace? Are we able to put all of the measures in place that we wanted to? And those will be really important factors for us, because it will be really about our ability in our own community to control the spread. With that being said, I was sent some newspaper articles from a community in the Pacific Northwest region. It wasn't really close to us, but it was a school district where the high schools just went back a couple of weeks ago for the first time with their hybrid learning. And within 2 days, they had 11 cases. And by the end of that first week, they had up over 40, I think 47, pushing 50. What they determined is none of that was from within the schools. It was all a big party that was thrown the weekend before school resumed. I say that because it really is a community effort. It's going to take all of us to keep our schools open and to keep our students and staff safe. And so making sure that we're being responsible as a community, that's going to be what's most important to keeping our schools open. And so far, we've done a really good job with that. Have we had some incidences? Absolutely. But again, it's not tied to the schools. And when we have had students or staff who have had a close contact, or even unfortunately contracted COVID-19, they've been open and honest with us, and we've been able to work through it. And that's how we're going to keep the schools open.
Well said. You want to turn over to the athletics question that was there? And Nick, this is a fast moving target as we are planning during an unprecedented time. So I forgot what the question is. Stacy or Debbie, do you have that at your access?
Sure. It's how will spring sports work and how will they be safe? Same question towards games, spectators. Will there be makeup practices like there normally would be? And will any athletic team practices be happening inside the high school building? So I guess that was a lot of questions. But
yeah, I'll try and grab them all, Stacy. So first of all, the idea around spectators, we're going to continue to work on this with our league. We were on the executive director call with Kinko this morning, and the idea around spectators and fans and their participation will be based on Department of Health and guidelines for all of our schools and school districts. Right now, it talks about, it gives some different parameters for spectators. So we will be looking to develop a plan for our school district that also is in concert with the schools that we'll be potting with inside of this. So right now we'll be potting with the Bellevue School District and competing against many schools inside of the Bellevue School District. And then with football, I think we also pick up Liberty and Hazen. And so we will want to have our spectator language and fan participation consistent with the schools that we participate with. And so we're going to be meeting as a district later on this week to discover kind of what that will look like. So more information will come out. As far as safety guidelines, that is posted on our district site. We have some Kinko safety guidelines that are consistent with the Department of Health, as well as our own school district guidelines for wellness screening, for mitigation strategies and masks, et cetera. And so you'll see on our district site, and it's also linked to our website that is provided by the Kinko conference, this safety document. So you can go both to the Kinko site or our own individual site and read through the safety guidelines and determine as a family if this is something that you want to you want to support and go forward with. And I'd be happy to have any of those individual conversations regarding the specific sport or inside and outside participation. Right now, we are going to have inside sport participation. And so for basketball, for volleyball, for badminton, whatever your sport may be, if it's drill or cheer, we will be having people come inside of our gyms. And so we will do so safely. So we met as a safety team and discussed many of these pieces of how we enter our schools safely and to compete safely with one another. And so that answers a few of those, Stacy. I think I knocked maybe 3 of the 4 or 4 of the 5 or 5 of the 6. So.
And then working with schedule, now that we've determined our kind of cohorts within our district, working to schedule our season 1 sports. And as I'm hearing, there are two big components of that. Not just our safe practices, but also making sure that we have consistent guidelines within our district for fan participation and numbers of people that can attend. And then on top of that, working with streaming services in the next several days to come, correct?
Correct. And those schedules are starting to be posted right now on our site. And so you can go to there and take a look. So if you just go to our athletic site here at MISD, and then there's a new link for our Kinko site as well for our own MI page. And you can look up girls soccer schedule. You can look up football schedule. You can look up some of those things already.
If I can go ahead and pivot to some of the things that we're working on with hybrid instruction and kind of what to anticipate next week, I'm ready to do that whenever you guys are. Any other questions we need to address before we move forward to that?
Walter, there were a couple that came in today that I think if there's a quick way, they're a little timely, so I thought it might be helpful to try to give at least a little bit of a response to. I know this survey came out this morning, and that families are declaring this week, and it's due on Friday, if they are going to go hybrid or online. And there's been several questions about that. And I know that a lot of those actually were originally in our bank for covering next week. But can you, like some of the big ones, and hopefully this can be concise, but
Sure.
Some of the big ones were, if I want my child to come back eventually, but they're not quite ready yet, can I choose hybrid and can they come back in a few weeks? or can you maybe just talk about that? Like, I know, or if you choose hybrid, decide to go virtual, I just know that there's been a little bit of confusion around how to make that decision.
Sure, and let me come back to that due date as well. So the first part would be with hybrid instruction, we started with our district commitments. Part of that commitment is that we're going to provide a quality educational opportunity and quality instruction for students. And the terms that are being used right now nationally are Zoomies and Roomies. So our Zoomies, we are as committed to providing a quality experience for them, even if they are staying virtual during that whole time. Our goal is that what they're experiencing, what they will experience moving forward, is not less than what they're experiencing now. It is at least as good, even if they're not coming into the building. And I think there's some potential interactions that could be better moving forward. I know that that's a hope. The second part would be with hybrid instruction. Please, we have 3 major groups really working with that, and then working with our district. The first one is we have a hybrid development team, which are some of our most veteran, respected teachers in every department, a representative that are working with our instructional coaches, and they've worked with the elementary teachers and coaches. So they're providing 4 basic paradigms or ways to operate a hybrid class for teachers to be able to utilize those. We've already had a lot of sharing of those ideas. We have a formal workshop with our teachers during our faculty meeting on Thursday, and we'll continue to work those departments. So that instructional model is not teaching to the room and then the people who are streaming at home just have to watch. It will be interactive on both sides. The second part is a direct question, and I hate to say no, but I'm going to on this one. We have to schedule, we have several classes that, when I say several, like 40, that have over 33 students in them typically if we're all in person. We are going to have to provide for no more than 15 to 1 at any one class period. We are waiting for the commitments so that we can start scheduling those to maximize the number of kids that can be in there on a given day for those classes that may be more than 30 and maybe have 18 one day. So if a student commits to hybrid, they're in. Once a student goes to virtual, whether that's in the beginning or later in the process, we can move a kid from hybrid to virtual. It's going to be very difficult. I'm not going to say no way, but it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to move a kid into hybrid for that. To answer another question with that, what happens if a student has one class in the day and they're the 16th kid in that room? We would have that last student in. They would be streaming from in the building in a monitored spot, like in the library, where they could stream into that class. And if somebody did go from hybrid to virtual, then they would be the next one in that class. But it's going to be very difficult for us to move somebody who started virtually into hybrid. I would encourage a parent, if that's what they believe is best for their kid, to start talking with their counselor now. And we can start to see it, at least give a pathway to that parent so that they can make the best decision for them and their family. And there was another part of that question I may have missed. Okay, if you think, but it was both, get it. So we're asking, once you commit to hybrid, we're asking you, that's the commitment you're making, but when you can always slide to virtual or streaming, it's really tough to come back once you've made that choice. We're going to have to schedule around that.
And you mentioned there might be something with a deadline.
Yeah, I saw the deadline, and that was appropriately written for this Friday, the 26th. If there is, if the reason that it's quick and early is so that those who don't reply, we can reach out to. So if there is a parent who really I need more information on this model, please let us know, and we can work with them for, we can do a 2-day extension to wait until we share that next Monday. And we'll be talking about the PTA meeting on Friday also. So I think by Tuesday morning next week, the information parents will need on the hybrid level will be there. And we'll cover that in depth. We'll cover it for a period of time Friday morning in the general PTA meeting, and then we'll do another webinar on that. And we'll hopefully involve some of our teachers and coaches in this conversation as well. So if we need to grant an extension to somebody, just let us know, but we could do that.
And just anecdotally, what we're seeing at the elementary, and granted they're younger students, but we're seeing the families wanting to come back, not wanting to, in other words, coming from virtual to back into hybrid, not the hybrid and now all of a sudden wanting to go virtual. And I think that's because of the job that our staff, our nurses, our teachers, our paraeducators, our bus drivers are doing to really instill a sense of confidence that we are doing this safely. So we're seeing a lot more requests coming from families who really want to be in the hybrid model. It's a little easier in elementary to make those accommodations because it's one class versus, as you're saying, Principal Kelly, when you have 6 and 7 classes, it's a little trickier. But just anecdotally, that's what we're seeing.
And that reminded me, students that do have an off period will be provided with a monitored safe distance space in the Library of the Commons that they can go during that off period, or they may go home during that period if time allows. I want to also share, if a parent has specific questions that are going to be determined on that, whether they send their, feel free to reach out to their associate principal. We work together closely as a team pretty much every day, even remotely. And feel free to reach out to me. We'll be glad to provide that information to them to the best of our ability. Even if it's not the answer they want, we'll get that to them as quickly as we can. All right. Any other questions?
So this one is not on the subjects we were just talking about, but it is in regards to 9th graders. And I would also add new families to that who have not been through the building. There'll be an opportunity to do a walkthrough or of their class schedule to orient themselves prior to the 22nd.
We are working on a freshman orientation. We're hoping and believing that our seniors will help lead that, so small pods of freshmen can come in, and everything from making sure that they know their schedule to learning the school song, and to really go through some of those traditions that uphold the symbols of the school community. And so working through that, and then just answering questions and working with our freshmen, because I know that our senior class wants to leave a positive impact and to hand that off well. The other part is we are working to have an orientation or reentry for our 10th and 11th graders as well. So those are plans that we're working on, and we will get that to our families as soon as we can. Thanks for that. By the way, Stacy, that was one that we talked about earlier. So thanks for reminding me and asking. And then next, if there's a question we haven't answered, feel free to send those to our PTA reps. We'll do our best to circle back on individual questions by email or phone call, and to circle back on systemic questions in our next webinar on Monday. But we will take a pretty deep dive into what instruction can look like and will look like in the weeks to come. All right, if there's nothing else, I see nods. Irina, first, thank you so much for running this meeting. Stacy and Debbie, thank you for organizing that with your other executive board, and thanks for working with us to at least provide good information to our families and work through a tough time with a great community. Thank you for welcoming me on board. Fred, thank you for your support and help. And Nick, man, I can't say enough. Fred mentioned earlier, working over the weekend to make sure things are safe and ready to go. Nick's the man. So we have a great administrative staff that includes Jeff Jones and Lisa Dean and Nick, and I couldn't ask more from them. So more from you all. So thank you very much.
And same to you, Principal Kelly. Thank you coming into a new community and a new school and a new state, and not even having a chance to meet all the staff in person, nor students, nor families is difficult. And you've done a great job with that. To our PTA, all of the parents who have provided feedback, leadership from our school board, and the community's patience. I know that our region has been more conservative in its approach to other regions in the United States. I have family in other states, and they've been doing things that we're about ready to do for a lot longer. In some ways, that's benefited us because we've been able to learn, and we recognize that we've been slower in the Puget Sound region, but we've been committed, given the parameters we have, and knowing what we know, to do what we think is going to be the very best for the Mercer Island students. So from our principals to our teachers, paraeducators, bus drivers, nurses, everyone, and including our families, thank you. At the end of the day, it's about our students, and that's where our next priority will be as soon as they're back in those doors. Until then, the priority is on them online.
And thanks for the 350 or so parents who joined us today,
Yeah.
and families who joined us. We will post this video for those who want this information, but we're not available. We'll post this on our website through PTA as well. And we will do the same next Monday night. We hope you join us next Monday and we work through this together. For that, I hope everybody has a great evening, and I'm going to go enjoy dinner. I hope everybody has had a chance to do the same.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.